Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? You guys look great, so it's fun. Since 1990. Back then, we only had 3 Star Wars movies, but there's more than just entertainment things that have changed in the last 36 years. In fact, I would say that one of the biggest changes that's happened over the last 36 years is back in 1990, generally speaking, when you left work stayed there when you got to go home, right? Unless you're a doctor, at least I've seen this on TV, they had the beepers on their belts that they would have to check every now and then. But more than likely, you had a phone that lived at home. Unless, of course, you're like super rich and you had one in your car, but the phone only did one thing, okay? And it only made calls. And you were able to go to work, stay at work, go home, stay at home, and those worlds hardly ever crossed. And something else that's happened a lot over the last 36 years has been there's this new liturgy that's taken over to where if you still travel to an office, you get into your garage in the morning and you press a button and it opens up the door. You pull your car out and you drive to your job and then you do everything there and you go home and you still feel somewhat connected to everything that's happening at work. But once you get into your own neighborhood, you press a button and that door goes back up. You pull back into your garage and you close it without interacting with anybody else in your neighborhood, where you go inside to your climate-controlled box and you sit down and you scroll on your phone while you watch people on TV pretend to have friends, right? Like 36 years ago, the world was different. And I'm sure that you have experienced this shift. I know that I have, but maybe we didn't realize how dangerous some of this was until we saw some of the statistics. So here, let's look at this chart together, okay? This just kind of shows you just how differently we interacted as a world between 1990 and 2021. So this is tracking the number of close friends that people have, all right? So in 1990, people with I have no friends, 3% of the population. Today is 12%. Number of close friends, 1 to 4 range, 27% in 1990. Today, it's 53%. 5 to 9 friends, 29 to 25. 10 or more, 33 to 13. So let me extrapolate some of the data for you just so you kind of see a little bit more. In 1990, 62% of the population had 5 or more what they would consider close friends. Now, in 2026, I'm sure it's less, but in 2021, it was 38%. People with no close friends has quadrupled from 3 to 12%. The very connected is also disappearing. Having 10 plus friends is actually kind of a rare thing now, to where it's like, whoa, you are a different person. So we look at this chart and we think, man, that's kind of sad. But I also think we look at it and say, yeah, but that's also incredibly normal. Right? We look at this and we think, that's just what it's like to be in society today. And what's really ironic is just look at how we treat the people who are most dangerous in society. We've all seen Shawshank Redemption, right? What did they do when Andy Dufresne, really started to cross the line in the eyes of the world? Well, they threw him into the hole, solitary confinement. They separate him from the rest of society and they try and keep him away from everybody else. And the real irony is that when it comes to solitary confinement, we have determined that this is one of the worst things you can do to a human being. You can separate them from the rest of their friends and from the rest of relationships and people. In fact, some advocates of prison reform would say that this is a form of torture and it needs to stop. Yet, the irony is, with our discretionary income, we try and actually recreate the same exact environment. Right? We want to go home where we just order food on a faceless app. We want to not necessarily interact with people. And we want to try and stay away as much as we can. And it's something that our penal system is said as punishment, but maybe the people who are against it would say this is torture. And what I want to make the case for today is that one of the greatest changes that you can make in your spiritual life is getting out of solitude and getting yourself firmly into community. And so I want to travel back in time, not 36 years, but 3,036 years. And I want you just to imagine for a second that you have to travel from one village to another. See, like today, it's super easy because we have sidewalks and paved roads and airports and buses and all sorts of things. But 3,036 years ago, if you were to travel from one village to another, this pathway would be fraught with danger, wouldn't it? I mean, you would be at risk of, potential floods, packs of wild animals, robbers trying to take over. There's all sorts of things that could be a problem. And so knowing that this is a possibility, one of the safest ways to travel 3,036 years ago was with the buddy system, where if you were going to move from one settlement to another, you'd almost always bring a friend. And the reason why is because if you were to travel and you were to slip and break a bone, you need somebody to help you get up. If you were to stub your toe or have a pack of wild animals come, you needed somebody else alongside you. And this is why Solomon, a former king as well as just all-around wise person, wrote this in Ecclesiastes 4:10. And I need to read this in the English Standard Version just for linguistic effect, okay? For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow, meaning within travel. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Here's what he's saying. You gotta be an idiot to travel alone, right? That's what he's saying. When he says, woe to him who is alone when he falls and has nobody there to lift him up. This was language that was actually reserved for a funeral. In fact, it means alas or destruction. So people would go to funerals and they would just scream out, woe, 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 because it was to announce to the world things are not good. And if you were to travel alone 3,000 years ago, you were at risk. You were a mark for robbers. You were no match for wild animals. You were one cold night away from death. And the diagnosis is this: isolation is terminal. So what Solomon is doing is he is describing a physical danger, right? He's it was so obvious. And in that day and age, it was even more obvious than it is today. If you travel alone, you are at risk. You are in danger. Things may not go well. But because of just the advancements in just our society and everything, we don't always necessarily feel that. And so actually, I want to give you another metaphor, another picture for this. And it's still not going to make sense immediately, but let me tease it out. See, there's a medical condition that I think actually speaks to the danger maybe even more. So author and pastor Justin Kendrick, in his book, The Sacred Us, he compares isolation to that of leprosy, which I know leprosy is not something that we deal with that much in today's world. And in fact, if you read through your Bible, you might actually ask the question, man, what is the deal with leprosy? It just shows up everywhere. They seem concerned about it in the beginning. They seem concerned about it at the end. It's there. And leprosy, of course, is a skin disease. And the problem with it is it's beyond cosmetic. The real issue is that it begins to kill the nerves. And so imagine how difficult life can become if suddenly you have no feeling in your skin, right? You're walking through the house, you step on a Lego, and you don't feel it, which maybe that would be but you grab a hot pan, you don't feel anything. Just nothing happens. But what happens is pain is actually a large benefit to us. Right? Imagine if you were walking and you slipped and you broke a bone and you didn't know to treat it because you didn't feel the pain. Imagine if you get some sort of cut that you were unaware of and all of a sudden infection sets in. See, pain is actually a really good reminder to us that something is not right and you have to treat it. You got to do something about this. And so what you need to have the nervous system working to where when pain does start to set in, you are inspired and you have an urgency to do something about that. And I believe that isolation is a new form of leprosy. And the reason why is because it kills your spiritual nervous system. See, what you need other people to help signal to you something is not right. That you need somebody in your life that on a spiritual level can say, stop, let go of that pan. It is burning you, right? Another interesting thing about leprosy is once you contract the disease, it has an incubation period of 5 to 20 years, which means that it can be in your system for almost 2 decades without you having any kind of symptoms. So by the time you actually start seeing the spots appear on your skin, the infection is already too deep at this point. And similarly, you can start drifting away from community and not actually feel the pain of that for years to come. Year 1, everything is great in your life. It's not a big deal. Year 2, you know what? Like, things are still going well. The economy is good. Your job is solid. Things are looking great. Year 3, year 4, year 5, but then something happens. When the disease starts to set in, it makes a difference. Suddenly, an affair, burnout, depression, and you don't have anyone around you to say, hey, we got to do something about this. And in the ancient world, if you were to know anything about leprosy, like the way it really appears in the New Testament, is whenever somebody who was leprous would walk into a village, they would have to announce, unclean, unclean. And what it was a signal, you've got to run away from this person. They're infectious, they could make you sick as well. But in the modern world, the answer is not distance. The modern world, the answer is proximity. That, even if you have leprosy, to get into treatment is going to help cure it. But if you have the spiritual form of leprosy, of just isolation, the solution is not staying far away from people, it is getting into community. And what I want you to see is that we need community. It is one of the most important parts of your spiritual life. That God could have done a lot of things when he organized what it meant to follow Jesus. But one of the things he did intentionally was, I don't want to just put you in a relationship, I wanted to put you in relationship with others. That is incredibly important. But the need for community is beyond just practical or pragmatic. It's also theological. See, if we were to go back to the beginning of beginnings, I want to read something from Genesis chapter 2. And if you're unfamiliar, Genesis is the very first book in the Bible. It tells the story of kind of how we got here. And in Genesis 2:18, it says this: Then the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper who is just right for him. All right, time out. What is the context for all of this? See, what we see here is actually like God has just formed Adam from the dust of the ground. And what he's done is he's given Adam a job. He's told him, I want you to go and name all of the animals. Now, something you need to understand at this point is that God has declared 7 times, it is good. As he starts making the earth, as he starts assembling creation, one of the most constant refrains for those first 2 chapters of Genesis is God made this, and it was good. Then God made this, and it was good. 7 times. Then out of nowhere, we get, it was not good. And he does this before Adam has gone and done any part of his job. He hasn't named a single animal yet. And I believe that he does this because he wants Adam to feel the ache of his isolation. So what happens is Adam sits down, he starts to name the animals, and I'm sure that he's like, well, there's Mr. and Mrs. Lion, here's Mr. and Mrs. Aardvark, here's Mr. and Mrs. Emu, I don't know. But the point is, he goes through this and he watches and he sees all this happening. And of course, the conclusion is, man, there is nobody like me. Like, there is no Mrs. in this equation. And I actually really appreciate the setting because, God could have told this story in any order he wanted. And the way this plays itself out is Adam is not in solitary confinement, right? Like, he is in this setting that is teeming with life. He's in this perfect garden. And it's also important to point out that sin has not entered the equation of our story yet. And so Adam is in this perfect relationship with God. As it's being declared, it is not good for him to be alone. And I think that one of the reasons why he does this is because, there's a temptation for us to say like, well, I don't necessarily need other people in my life. I have a cat or, I have a dog, like whatever it is, like, and I don't necessarily need others. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's a whole group of people who would say, I think all I need in life is Jesus. And I love your heart, but you're arguing with your creator here. Because here you have Adam in perfect relationship with God. You have him in an environment that is like he has no wants, he has no needs, and yet is still not good. Even Jesus, God in the flesh, as he comes and dwells among us, one of the first things he does is he starts to make friends. We see him surround himself with 12 best friends, not to mention all of the other people who are described throughout the New Testament as, oh, this was a friend of Jesus. And I believe that this is especially pertinent for us today. As the statistics show, we are losing friends at an alarming pace. And to make things even worse is that those stats from 2021 don't even take into account one of the biggest things that have happened over the last couple of years, and that is the advent of artificial intelligence, which suddenly now gives us this idea that we have companionship and we have relationship, when it's just on the other side of it, it's just zeros and ones. And what I'm trying to say is there is no substitute for another human being who cares just a little bit about you. Now, before we get into more practical, I want to take this a little bit deeper just for a second. Is that if we were to go back and read a little bit earlier before Genesis 2:18, we'd see that when God actually forms Adam of the dust, he says, "Let us make man in our image." For the Bible nerds in the room, just want to point out some obvious things here. This is a plural pronoun. So who is God talking to in this moment? Well, he's talking to himself. God declares, hey, it's not good for man to be alone before the fall. The world is perfect, but man is alone. But God says, let us. And the reason why he says this is because God also lives in community. That one of the bedrock foundations for what it means to be a Christian is that we believe that God is three in one. That he is Father, Son, and Spirit. By his very essence and nature, God lives in community. And you, as somebody who is an image bearer, somebody who is imago Dei, made in the image of God, you were not made for isolation. You were made to live in community. Now, isolation is dangerous on a theological level, but it's also dangerous on a biological level. Some of you may be aware, but in the 1900s, there was a lot of people in the medical community who thought, we are about to watch the mortality rate drop. That for years and years and years, orphans would be born and they would just die at this alarming pace. And the assumption was the reason why they're dying is because they're in unsafe environments, they're in unsanitary environments, they're being discarded, and that nobody's taking care of them. And so what the medical community did is they put together these incredible orphanages. And they made sure that they were sterile, and they made sure that they had full staffs. They made sure that they had all of the things that a baby would need. But what they found was that the orphans were still dying at an alarming pace. Despite the fact that they had all the calories that they needed, despite the fact that they had all the care that they needed, despite the fact that it was a clean environment. And why was that? Well, what they discovered is that these babies lacked touch, and that nobody was coddling the child, nobody was kissing the child, nobody was talking to the child. And there's a term for it, failure to thrive. And so what I'm trying to say is Genesis chapter 2 is not just true theologically, it's also true biologically. It is not good for man to be alone. And so if this is the case, how do we fix it? Let's go back to Ecclesiastes. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 4, starting in verse 7. It says, I observed yet another example of something meaningless under the sun. This is the case of a man who is all alone, without a child or a brother, who works hard to gain as much wealth as he can. But then he asks himself, who am I working for? Why am I giving up so much pleasure now? It is so meaningless and depressing. I mean, here's the picture. You have somebody who lives completely in solitude and isolation, and they're working so hard to get ahead. And you know what? They did it. They got the job, they got the promotion, they made the sale. They got the extra letters at the end of their name. Like, they got everything that they ever thought was possible. But at the end of it, Who is it for? He's posing the question, what is the purpose behind all of this? You know, there's a story of Jimmy Johnson, the football coach, and back in the late 1980s, he was at the top of his profession as one of the top college coaches in America. He'd taken the University of Miami to a national championship, but they were also a powerhouse. They were just incredible. And then in 1989, he got a job offer to be the head football coach for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, what's crazy is they were the worst team in the NFL when he took the job. And in the next couple years, of course, there's all sorts of things like the Herschel Walker trade, all that kind of stuff, but he ends up going to the top of the NFL. He wins 2 Super Bowls in a row. But here's part of the story you may not know, is as soon as he gets the job offer to go to the Cowboys, he takes his wife of 20 plus years out, and he sits down and he looks across the table from her and he says, this job is going to require all of my focus. And he slides divorce papers over to her. This is a man with children. This is a man with, 2+ decades of marriage. And he says, this is more important. And he walks away from her. And 4 years later, he's fired. Now, some might still hear this and think, wow, he's still living off of that decision. Like he's still, celebrated as this incredible, titan of coaching success. But within 4 years, he wasn't even the coach there any longer. Jesus would say, what does it profit a person to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? I think that we would declare that this is a tragedy. And here's the thing, success in solitude is still failure. Now, here's some of the benefits that we actually read of joining up with other people and living in community. It says in verse 9, 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. The truth is if you're in community with other people, you simply can just accomplish more. There's teamwork, it makes the dream work, right? Now, there's this old adage about draft horses. You may be familiar with this, but a singular draft horse can pull 8,000 pounds of cargo. That's pretty incredible, isn't it? 8,000 pounds, 4 tons, a draft horse can pull. Now, if you team one draft horse with a second draft horse, the assumption would be, well, how much weight do you think you can pull? The assumption would be 16,000 pounds, right? You go, 1 is 8, 2 has got to be 16. Even we can do that basic math. But here's what's incredible. You put one draft horse next to a second draft horse, and suddenly there's this multiplication effect. They don't just pull 16,000 pounds. They can pull, when they're teamed up together, 24,000 pounds. It's when you put 2 together. 2 is better than 1. Now it keeps going. It says in verse 10, if one person falls, the other person can reach out and help. This is the verse we read earlier. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, 2 people lying close together can keep each other warm, but how can one be warm alone? So the picture is at night, it's freezing outside, you need the warmth of another person. So what this means is that whenever you're in community with others, there is a resilient quality to you. That you need somebody with a listening ear that can help you as you're going through insecurities or grief. You need that there is something about I can keep going when there's other people in my life. And it keeps going in verse 12. It says, a person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but 2 can stand back to back and conquer. There was a study that was done that just shows mathematically how this can be proven. So what happens is if you just have a goal, all right, you have a dream, you have a goal, you have a 10% chance of accomplishing it just by naming it, just by saying, hey, I want to do this. 10%, you can do that. However, if you make a concrete plan, you jump from a 10% chance of accomplishing that goal to 50%. That's a pretty good jump, right? Just to go from I named it to I put a plan together to accomplish it. It goes from 10 to 50%. But here's what's crazy. If you don't put together your concrete plan, you just figure out what your goal is and you share it with another person. And you just tell them this is what I want to accomplish. It jumps from 10% to 65%. It's already better than like I went by myself and put together my concrete plan. And if you team it all together, if you put together a concrete plan with stating your goal and sharing it with another person in a relationship where there's some accountability, it jumps all the way to 95%. The only variable, because it's not that suddenly you became more capable, it's not suddenly that the goal became so much less. The only thing that changes is that you bring somebody else and you put some accountability with it. The variable that turns it from a coin flip into almost a guarantee is a back-to-back friend. Somebody that like as you were going through. And here's how Solomon finishes the section. He says, 3 are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. I mean, here's the visual, right? Like you've got yourself this rope. And whenever you start to pull some of the strands off of each other, right? Like when you're on your own, it just so naturally and easily breaks. It's just so easy. Now you put 2 together, yeah, it's a little bit harder. But when you get 3, I mean, suddenly it's almost indestructible, right? Like we have felt this, we have seen this. And what I want you to know is there is strength in the strands. There's a theological reason why you need to be in community. There is a biological reason why you need other people. But then there's also just a functioning in life necessity for it. You need other people in your life. Consider just the picture of the Roman legion. So the Romans had this formation they call Testudo, or it means the tortoise. And so a single legionnaire out in the field, like he was skilled, but he was also vulnerable, that he could be attacked so many different ways. And so whenever the commanders would say like, hey, we need to like storm this, he would yell out Testudo and they would interlock. And we've seen the pictures where they take their shields and they form like, something from above, they do something on the sides, they cover every single section. And what they essentially become is a human tank. And you could almost march an army over them and they would still seem to make it. And what I'm trying to say is that for those of us here, you don't have to be strong enough to stop the arrows yourself. You just have to be connected enough to stay in formation. So when the arrows of shame or job loss rain down, the person who's just like completely on their own, they're gonna get hit. But the people who are in group, the people who are part of a team, the people who are part of a community, they can make it. And so we have a choice as a church. We live in an area where there's a lot of high achievers. There's a lot of high achievers in this room. So many of you are at the top of your professions, or you've gotten great educations, or you're in the middle of getting a great education, or you have accomplished a lot in life. And so there's a temptation to think, yeah, this is for other people. And we can be a collection of 100 very talented individuals who just sit in rows. Or it can be a legion that locks shields. And see, I have this vision for our church that if you were to lose your job, you have a defense system around you. That whenever you lose a loved one, you have a defense system around you. When you confess your sin to somebody else, like you know that you're not going to get judged, you know you're going to get covered. And the thing is, I'm telling you right now, I know this isn't easy. One of the reasons why some of us stay away from groups is because we're like, people are kind of annoying. Proverbs 27:17 would say that the way that iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. If you think that that's like a really easy process, you've never seen like iron get sharpened. You see iron get sharpened, what do you see? You see sparks, you see friction, but ultimately what comes out on the other side of that? Something useful. See, if you choose just to stay apart from everybody else, you get to keep control. You get to control how warm the room is, you get to control what's on TV, you get to control what you eat. Yeah, but what do you trade for that? What do you lose in the process? See, I'm saying community is messy, I will give you that. But isolation is terminal. And if it's between terminal or messy, choose the mess, right? See, we have one button for this at our church, okay? We have one way to solve this, and I'm just telling you right now, you need to join a group. That this is one of the most important things you can do. This isn't me just saying like, well, we have them, so you need to do them. Like that's not, the reason why we have these is for your benefit. It's for your success. It's for your survival. And so I actually want to highlight a couple groups right now, and I'm actually going to do this for the next 4 weeks, so just, and this is going to be funny because you're going to be like, oh, of course he's going to highlight this group. We're just going in order, okay? That's all I'm saying. We're just going in order. But I have a couple groups I just want to highlight that you can join. So let's look at this one. This is a great one. This might be the perfect group for you. Some of you, not so much, but for many of you, this is the perfect group. So starting February 15th, weekly Sundays from 5 to 4:30, it's in Claremont. We encourage kids. That might be the perfect group for you. But let's look at the next one. All right. Number 2, if you're a young adult, Rachel is an incredible leader. She's going to do awesome with this. Every other Thursday starting February the 19th from 7:30 to 9. It's going to be right here at the church. If you're in your 20s or your 30s, this is an incredible group to be a part of. And I'm just telling you, there's more than just those two. Look through your program. Use the button in front of you. Don't let today end without you joining a group. And I know you're thinking, Matt, I'm way too busy. I can't do this. I'm barely having enough time to get my kids to soccer practice and get to the gym. I'm just telling you, you don't have time not to do this. That it could be the difference between an incredible 2026 and a terrible one. The idea that you need the infrastructure in your life. So take out your phone, tap it, sign up on your connection card. If you're like, where do I sign up on your connection card? Just on the prayer request line. Just write down, I want to join group number. All right. A couple other things. Some of you are like, yeah, it's such a big commitment. I need to pray about that, and pray about it for sure. But let me give you a couple other ways that you can start to find community. The first way is this. Look around. Find somebody like, yeah, I'd hang out with that person. If you're a dude, I'm just giving you like, let me explain something that just works in your life. You don't want to get together for a drink to just stare at each other and talk about how your life is going. I know you don't want to do that. So go do something with them. All right? Look at that guy and say, hey, there's a couple games on this afternoon. Where are you watching them? You might say, hey, let's go fishing. Let's go for a run. Let's go to the gym. I don't know what your thing is. Like, just look around, find somebody like, I'd hang out with that person, and just make the ask. Ladies, I don't know, do what you do, right? And just go hang out. I'd also encourage you, the second way to just start to find some community is start getting prayed for. We have a couple ways to do this. If you write a prayer request on the back of your connection card and you drop it in the bucket a little bit later, we will pray for you. And you'll start to feel the benefit of community. A second way to do this, we have a whole prayer team that every single week will text everybody that wants to hear like how they can pray for them. If you are not receiving this text and you would like to be prayed for, write this on your connection card. Say, I want to be prayed for. And every single week until you die, you're going to get a text message from somebody in our church saying, hi, I am with the prayer team. I want to pray for you. It's the only way out. I'm sorry. It's the only way out. This is so incredibly important. That's why I'm just doubling down. And here's the last thing I'll let you think about. So Jesus is on the cross, okay? He has just been beaten mercilessly. He has been flogged. He's been mocked. He's been ridiculed. And we only have a handful of things that Jesus said while he was on the cross. And really one of the only expressions of pain that we hear is when he yells out, and he's quoting Psalm 22, and he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And take this back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, that God lives in community. There has been no beginning and there will be no end, that there wasn't a day that God was introduced to God. Like this is who he is. And one of the greatest expressions of pain that Jesus goes through on the cross was not like, ow, you guys hurt my back, or I can't believe you nailed those like nails into my hands. His expression was, Why have you forsaken me? What he's saying is the worst part of the experience of the cross was the loss of relationship that he was in. And I think the same thing is true for us. That for us to be isolated and alone and live in solitude, there is almost no greater pain than that. But you don't have to. God's inviting you into a relationship. And what's even more is where Jesus was cut off voluntarily, he does that so that you can be connected to him. That on the other side of his sacrifice, you are now part of his family and part of a relationship with him. And his encouragement and his offer to invite us into a relationship with other people who he died for is not just to fill up an evening of your week. It's because it is important and it is essential. And it is part of how we not only get better individually, but how we change the world. Let me pray. God, you are the source of our hope. You are the source of our life. But God, we exist because of you. It's in you that we live and move and have our being. And God, you modeled what it looks like to be in community. God, you've shown us the roadmap. You've given us the plan. I just pray that we would have the courage to step forward. The God, that we'd stop lying to ourselves that we don't need it, that it's not that big of a deal. The God, instead, we would rest in you, that we would be in community with you, that God, we would find our way into community with other people. So I pray right now for those in this room who need to join a group, that you would take the fear out of their vocabulary, the God, that you would take it out of their emotions and their feelings, and that you would push them into a group right now, that you would push them into a relationship with somebody else in our church, that God, you would push them into a relationship with our prayer team, that the God, that they would take that next step. And God, I also pray for those who heard today that you died for them, but they've never made that personal. The God, that you would put this prayer on their lips and in their heart, that God, I need you. I need you to pay it all. God, I want to praise the one who paid my debt. And so, Lord, I'm asking that you would save me, that you would invite me into a relationship with you, that God, that you would accept me as a son or a daughter, and the God, that you would. And you would put this prayer on their lips. I'm asking you to forgive me my sins, take full control of my life, to be my Lord and Savior, to be the one who calls the shots. And I pray this all in your son, Jesus' name, amen.